Civilization VII will change diplomacy big time, and let's be honest here for a brief second, good. Because when you were looking back at the previous Civ games, there wasn't really a lot of interaction there, wasn't there? Like, there was basically just, hi, how are you doing? Wanna be my friend? Wanna do trading? No, let's go to war. And that was the maximum of interactions you had with other civilizations, which is completely bizarre when you think about that the game is literally called Civilization, and it is also about interacting with your neighbors. And now the good news is Civ 7 is trying to change that. And there will be 3 big interactions you can do with diplomacy. You can still, of course, talk to your neighbors, do the trading and all that. Now you will also be able to interact more with city-states, we will talk about here in just a second. And third, there will be also diplomatic interactions you can utilize throughout the game. But how do you do all that? Well, to understand that, we have to talk about a new resource which is being implemented in Civ 7, and that is influence. How do you gain influence? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You are gaining influence every turn, and you can increase the income of influence like you would increase your other resources in the game. So that means there would be buildings, there would be events and other things you can do in the game to increase it every turn. But now, what are you doing exactly with the influence? Well, when you have acquired enough influence, there are tons of options open for you. The first one is to talk to city-states. Yes, city-states are back, but they are functioning a little bit different this time. Previously, in the other Civ games, city-states were already on the map, right? They would just put them down there and you had to deal with them. Now they start as smaller nations and then evolve into a city-state, and when they do that, you can interact with them. What can you do? Well, you can do what you did in previous games. You can try to bolster your friendship with them, get resources. You can also gain units you can then use as mercenaries for a certain amount of time, or you can integrate them completely into your army. But, and this is probably the 2 most important parts beyond trading and all that, is that you can A, integrate the city-state into your empire. Yes, you can finally do that peacefully and you don't have to wage a war all the time. And second, you can use your influence to go to a city-state and say, hey, see that other nation over there? Yeah, I think they said something about your mom. You should definitely go and check that out, and then they will hopefully attack the other nation. So you can influence them through the influence. The second big part is diplomatic interactions, right? And when you are coming to diplomatic interactions, this is a little bit more than you were able to do in the previous Civ games. Yes, there is still the possibility that you are showing up to another nation and you will go, hi, how are you doing? Want to be my friend? Want to do some trading? Want to do some research collaboration where everyone is getting a little bit of extra research every turn? Or, well, do you want to go to war? So that still exists. And by the way, the reason why I'm not talking too much about trading here in this video is because we have another video coming up where I'm going a little bit deeper into how the trading works, and more importantly also how the resources now work, because they also have changed that quite significantly. But going back to the diplomatic interactions, they are basically neutral interactions, like we already talked about, more favorable interactions, aka endeavors and treaties, which is like, as I said, the trading, or do we want to have open borders? Do we want to be allies? Something like that. And then, of course, there are the more negative interactions, like sanctions. Yes, you can now sanction an empire, and you can basically choose which debuff they are getting, like hinder the military production, which would then decrease the military production in that nation. Of course, you need a lot of influence of doing so, and this would also lower again your relation with that nation. But there is one more thing you can do, and come a little bit closer, don't tell anyone, because we have to talk about espionage. Yes, espionage and spies are back, but this time you were doing it with influence. So that means you can choose another nation, and then you can say, okay, take some money, steal some science, and bring that back to me. Of course, the other nation can find out about it, and if they do, they will A, stop you, and B, they will be pretty pissed. So, what does that really mean now that nations are more happy with you or more pissed with you? Well, let's go back to the beginning where you are meeting a nation. And when you're meeting a nation, you have basically three options. The first one is you are just saying hi, that doesn't cost you any influence, that doesn't do anything to the relation, and that's it. Then you can have a more positive interaction and say, hey, how are you doing? Welcome in. Do you want something to eat, to drink? This costs you a little bit of influence, but will increase the relation with that nation. And then, of course, there's the third option, which is going like, hi, nice to meet you, and now piss off. And that will cost you also influence again, because every diplomatic interaction is costing you influence, but will also piss them off. So why would you piss them off? Well, because war. Let's talk about that. War is, of course, back, and it is one of the last resorts in the Civ games. Or for some of you warmongers out there, it's the first resort. But war has changed a bit. So when you are now starting to interact with other nations, you basically really need a reason to attack another nation. And let's say the whole interaction with the other nation is going bad, influence is deteriorating, and unfortunately, in the end, you both agree it is time to beat the living shit out of each other with war. Well, that's fine. You are going to war, nothing is happening, there are no buffs, no debuffs, everyone is just doing their thing, right? But let's say you are friendly with that nation. You have been actually allies for a long time, and then you just realize, nah, I want your land, man. Let's start a surprise war. If you do that, well, you are still going to war, but your people will be absolutely unhappy in their cities because they're not really in favor of this war. And far more important, you will get a hefty debuff when you are fighting against the other nation. And they will, of course, get a buff. And their people will be in support of this war because they will be in support fighting against the aggressor. So you want to make sure that you have actually enough grievances to go to war. And the same goes, of course, for the AI, right? If they are starting a surprise war at you, you will get all the bonuses and they will get all the debuffs. And so I really love that they are now adding things which will allow you to interact with nations a little bit more, like the sanctions, before you are going to war. Because in the previous Civ games, it always felt so useless to just tell somebody by denouncing them, hey, you're a piece of shit, and the AI or the player goes, yeah, I know, right? So that's something they're now trying to fix a little bit more, and I love that. Also important to note, when we are talking about being a piece of shit, keep in mind that there will be agendas again with the AI. So there will be just some AI players who want to be your best buddy or who want to see you hang from a rope, which is, of course, not great. But those are the big changes coming to diplomacy in Civ 7. If you still have some questions, let me know down below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like. And also, if you're new to the channel, you love strategy games, that's what we're focusing on here, then I would appreciate if you might consider to subscribe. With that said, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.